Lovely. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome panel members and colleagues to this meeting of the Health and Adult Social Services Standing Scrutiny Panel, which is being held in hybrid form, with some members and officers joining the meeting online and others being present in the room. I'll just remind colleagues that the meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. Some colleagues will be aware of the funeral of former councillor Phil Portwood that took place today. I just wanted to pass on the committee's condolences to Phil's family, and just to invite Councillor Kate Crawford, who I know knew Phil very well, just to say a couple of words in his memory.
So, okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chair, for agreeing to let me just say a few words in memory of my former East Acton Ward Councillor colleague, Councillor Phil Portwood, whose funeral sadly was this afternoon. He died very suddenly a few weeks ago, and he was 65. Councillor Phil Portwood served as a member of this committee, and following from his departure from the council, he was a respected member of the Ealing Primary Care Trust and remained involved in supporting Ealing community transport. I think all political parties and a number of voluntary organisations were represented at Phil's funeral this afternoon. So thank you, Chair, for allowing me to pay this tribute to Phil's lifelong commitment to public service and his sterling contribution to public health. He couldn't have been a nicer and more valued member of the Labour group and serving the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford, for that beautiful tribute. Before we move on, just want to remind colleagues of some housekeeping. Members and officers who are joining online, could I just ask you to make sure that you're on mute, and just a reminder to raise your hand if you wish to speak. And I think we've only got Councillor Josh Blacker online, is that right, Anna-Marie? Excellent. We have Roy Willis from the Ealing Reclaim Social Care Action Group online as well, and Sarah Boston and Martin Eady in the public gallery. Thank you very much for joining, and Councillor Haley as well. I have not received any apologies for absence in terms of item 1 on the agenda this evening. Item 2 is urgent matters, and there are no urgent matters to discuss tonight. So that brings us on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Can I ask panel members to declare if they have any personal or prejudicial interest in any of the matters on tonight's agenda? No? In which case, we'll move on to item 4, which is matters to be considered in private. There are no matters to be considered in private tonight, which brings us swiftly on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Panel members, can I ask you for your view in terms of the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of September? Are we in agreement that they're a true and accurate record? Thank you very much. And I should just point out that Anna-Marie, in her usual efficiency, has circulated a response to the actions arising from that meeting, which just covers off the progress that have been made against each of those. So thank you very much, Anna-Marie. Item 6 is the appointment of a co-op team member. So this evening we are being asked to confirm the appointment of Anthony Brooks from the Ealing and Hounslow Community Voluntary Services as a co-op team member of the panel. Anthony, can I just pass on to you to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, my personal background is that I've been, I was an in-house solicitor for about 30 years, although I retired in March. and I work principally for professional bodies, the most recent position I held being for the British Medical Association. I'm coming as the representative of Ealing and Hounslow Community Voluntary Service, which I've been a trustee for 5 years, and I became its vice chair in September this year. I'll give you a little bit of background about EHCVS, although I imagine that many of you will know of it. It's a charity. It's been on the Ealing scene actually technically since 1988. It started as Ealing Voluntary Service Council and then became Ealing Community Voluntary Service, and in 2020 we expanded to embrace Hounslow as well, so we cover principally Hounslow Borough and Ealing Borough. It's a second level charity. The core activity and what it started as is second level. Its core mission is really to support a network of community and voluntary groups within its particular area, Ealing and Hounslow. And indeed, we have many of whom are actually technically members of the organisation. And we have connections with several hundred such local organisations over the two boroughs. That's the core activities: providing support, governance advice, advice on how groups can apply for funding from other groups, and so on, and development advice as well. But more recently, in the last few years, we've actually started to get involved more in actual partnership and consortia activity, where we tend to be the manager, if you like, the main partner who's the managing partner of groups to make partnerships more effective. And there's a number of projects that we're involved in the Ealing area. For example, the smaller ones include the digital reclaim project, where old laptops were upgraded and given out to people who needed access to laptops. Ukrainian infrastructure support project in the light of the recent influx of Ukrainian refugees to help them find their feet and connect them together. And more recently, I think we have won the contract with Ealing Council to be the voice for Ealing, which is the group that brings together voluntary and community groups across Ealing. And indeed, we're following in a few years ago, we got the Hounslow voice as well contract. So that's really what we're about. And it's in the light of that organisation that I'm here to hopefully become a co-opting member. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anthony. Can I check with the panel? Do we agree with the appointment of Anthony as a co-opting member of the panel?
Absolutely.
Excellent. We really look forward to having your contribution, and welcome to the panel this evening. In a slight change to the agenda, I'm going to take the panel's work programme at this stage in the meeting, primarily because I feel that often with it towards the end of the meeting, it doesn't always necessarily get the due attention it deserves, colleagues. So we are going to move it up the agenda for all of our future meetings as well. So the panel work programme's been circulated. We are to review it and to agree the work programme. I will invite any questions and comments. Before doing so, I just wanted to draw the panel's attention to the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting that was held on Tuesday, the 5th of December. There was an update at that meeting from the NHS North West London Integrated Care Services on its plans to reduce its running costs by 30%. There's an initiative that's come down from central government about reductions of 30%. This would impact staffing, we were told, with a possible reduction of 100 posts across North West London. The ICS are at the early stage of engagement prior to consultation on that issue. JOS members, including myself, raised concerns about the impact that the cuts would have on borough-based partnerships, and there'll be more information to follow. We may well organise a specific session for HASP on that issue at a future meeting. So I'll keep colleagues updated, but happy to take any comments and questions. Councillor Mataza.
Yes, sorry, I'm not sure how we are going to cope with these cuts. We are already, there is no skin on the bones, and people, as you may be aware of the fact that the prescribing budget is also cut, and we are asked not to prescribe certain items which patients expect. And there is a report that unfortunately, the highest stolen item from the superstore is paracetamol syrup. And people are actually, I mean, my bosses are sitting there, people are actually begging us to provide the items which are also available over the counter. But how we are going to cope with these budget cuts, this is the war in Europe and the situation in the Middle East, and it is already putting an impact on people's mental health. And the further deterioration and cuts in this budget, I don't know how we are going to cope. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mataza. And as I say, we will look at this at a future opportunity. Were there any other questions or comments? Councillor Conti. Thanks, Councillor Conti. Part of the reason behind that is because one of the items this evening has been deferred to the next meeting, but we will have a look and see if we can do any reshaping. Conscious not to overload the committee, because we've seen what can happen with very late meetings and us not giving the items the attention they deserve. So we'll definitely look at that. But thank you for raising it. Councillor Crawford. Oh, microphone. Sorry.
Whether somewhere along the line we should be returning to looking at adult acute mental health beds, including younger individuals, youth. So they are young adults rather, because, yeah, I think we should at least have some sort of an update on progress, perhaps in May.
We can certainly look at that. My reluctance to agree to it tonight is just that there's a cut across with Councillor Haley's scrutiny panel on children. So I just want to pick that up. But if I can take that away and come back to you, and we'll figure out how we're going to take that forward, if that's okay.
Chair, all I can say is, that's very welcome what Councillor Haley is doing, but I don't think there's any harm in this committee, sort of returning and actually, if getting any ongoing recommendations, and to have an understanding on what we're doing on as a body on the council.
Definitely. Thank you very much. I think Councillor Alexander, you've got a question online
it's not,
as well.
It's a point. I think the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Don't seem to be able to hear you just now.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
If she wants to put it in the chat, well.
There seems to be a slight problem with the audio. Councillor Alexander, I don't know if you want to just pop it in the chat instead. I think we'll come back to you. We don't seem to be able to hear. Actually, could I just ask another online participant just to unmute? Perhaps Councillor Blacker, if you could unmute, and we'll just see if we can hear you, just in case there's a problem our end.
I suspect you probably can't, because I could hear Councillor Alexander.
I think there's a slight issue with the audio, so we'll just pause momentarily whilst that's resolved. Do just bear with us, colleagues online. You can hear me, but
I was
we
just
can't
making
hear
a
you.
point. Josh, I was just making a point about the Health and Wellbeing Board anyway, so that's it, really. Can you hear me now? Okay.
No, I'm afraid we still can't hear you. Do just bear with us. Well, I can hear you, but it's very, very quiet,
Well,
and the rest of the committee
I just was making a point about the Health and Wellbeing Board, so that they might be talking about young adults or young people during that meeting. So just, yeah.
Technical problems, don't you just love them? We will just pause for a second so that we can resolve this, because I'm mindful that if I move on to other items on the agenda, some colleagues online will want to speak, including Councillor Blacker. So we'll just take a 5-minute pause, if that's okay, whilst we fix this. Um,
Do you want to? Tom said he had a resolution.
We'll just give it another minute or so because we think we might have a resolution, but if not, just to inform colleagues that the plan will be to move on to the finance update on adult social care. Unfortunately, we won't be able to hear from Councillor Blacker, but Kerry will cover off the detail in the report, and then we can deal with the partnership boards item after that. And just in case we haven't got the technical issue resolved, Robert, I know you can hear me. So Robert, we may have to come back to you on the Safeguarding Adult Board report at a future meeting. I hope that's not the case because we've just had a conversation about the pressure on future agendas, but let's just see. We might have a resolution. So I'm going to bring the meeting back to order, if that's okay. So we don't have a technical fix, but Kerry's kindly agreed to present the finance update on adult social care. So Kerry, if I can come to you, we've got about half an hour allocated to this item, and obviously questions from people online after that. So Kerry, if I come your way, so this is an update on our financial position for Q2 of the financial year for the Adult Social Care Directorate. It includes information regarding the comparative level of spends in 21-22. After Kerry's presentation, I'll invite questions and comments from panel members. We do have a question from Roy Willis from Erskag, who is obviously attending online. If we can't come to Roy at that stage, I'll ask the question on his behalf because he has notified us in advance. So, Kerry, if I pass over to you, thanks ever so much.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out in quite a lot of detail the financial position for adult social care at Q2, so that's to the end of September 2023. If I can take members of the panel through some highlighted aspects, so the Q2 position on a budget of 99.384 million is that there is an 11.7 overspend, 11.7 million overspend, which had reduced from a 15.4 overspend at the end of Q2. The drivers for the significant overspend that's been experienced within adult social care are multiple and coming from different directions in terms of how we're feeling the pressures within the service. We've seen significant inflationary increase in cost of services that we're procuring from the market. We've seen over a 25% increase in the cost of care home beds for older people over the last 12 months, which is a significant challenge. we're seeing the impacts of the significant challenges that the NHS are facing in terms of waiting lists and the impact of that on the level and acuity of need in the people who are coming into our services. And we're also seeing increased demand in terms of the impact of the cost of living crisis on the communities that we serve and the increased demand. So in effect, we've got increase in the unit cost of services that we're procuring. We've got an increase in the level of needs. So that's the individual acuity of individuals that are approaching the service for support, and also the level and the number of people that are approaching us for support. So it's a triumvirate of challenges that we're currently experiencing coming into the service. As a service, we've taken a range of actions to try and manage the spend position. This is included increased funding that we've agreed with colleagues within the Ealing Borough-based partnership for payments to carers, to support carers in the valuable roles that they play within the community. We've put increased resources into reducing waiting times for assessment so that people are coming into services quicker to support them with their needs. We've also put additional funding into co-production boards, which I'll be speaking about shortly, Chair, and significant focus across social care and NHS partnership around quality assurance of services that are provided with the through the provider care, the care provider sector. If I can take members through the presentation, and if I refer to the page numbers as in the pack rather than on the slides. So the high-level outturn position for Q2 is set out on page 63, as I mentioned earlier. There was in a 3.7 reduction in the overspend position between Q1 and Q2. The ongoing forecast overspend explanation, I've talked this through at a higher level with you previously. So is increasing growth in the region of 9.4 million, over £4 million growth now in terms of inflation expected within 23-24, and there's further inflationary costs, including within that in terms of price of services procured directly from the market, and also the investment that's been put into real living wage, which is a really key aspect of what we're doing in Ealing to support people in the care sector receive a fair wage for the services that they provide. There's also been challenges in terms of how we've worked within the inflation management for the private finance initiative. Care homes, we've got 4 large care homes, and we've got we've drawn down some additional money from the corporate centre to support us with the inflationary pressures through that contract. There's been work to reduce the placement cost through a methodology of this is for home care providers in terms of commissioned and actual hours that we procure from the sector. We received additional money through the NHS discharge grants to meet cost pressures, and there's also been a significant amount of work around direct payments and the clawback of costs, unused funds into the service. In terms of the cost by service area on page 66, and some members may find this useful because it's not always full. Oh, I've lost my page now. Page 66, this sets out the spend in each of the service areas that we're responsible for in adult social care. The majority of our activity sits within older adults, so that's people over the age of 65, so it's where the large proportion of individuals in receipt of services are, and our spend in that service area is 38 million. However, people with learning disabilities are a much smaller number of people in receipt of services who have a learning disability, but our spend at P6 was 43 million. So you can see that proportionately our spend on people with learning disabilities is significantly greater than it is for older people within the borough. Moving on to slide 67, I think it's useful just to refer members to the table that sits in the middle of this chart that shows the spend per month or per period, financial period, compared to the activity. So this is the orange and the blue line on the graph, you'll see that the orange line, which is the number of people in receipt of services, has stayed pretty much static throughout the year, whereas the cost increase has gone up significantly through this period of time. So this shows that there is demand management processes in place within the service, but as I mentioned earlier, the inflationary costs and the acuity costs are impacting on the service. Just moving forward, Chair, into other areas that I think will be of interest, but obviously want to take questions at the end. Slide 69, slide 70 set out our mitigation processes in terms of how we're managing the challenging environment. You'll see that a significant amount of work has been done in terms of build income. This is ensuring that our business is run efficiently and effectively, and that charging an accrual of income is dealt with in good time, and it reduces the pressure on provided services. There's also on slide 70, you'll see setting out of how we're receiving government grants, understanding how some of these are one-off and some of these are recurring, and what that means in terms of the overall financial position. Slide 71 sets out the recurring one-off and government grant position. So our management actions on a recurring basis sit at around just under £12 million. However, we see that there's one-off savings and government grants which aren't recurring in the region of just under £7 million. So this is a significant challenge for us every year, as we don't find out about grants, and so certainly winter pressure grants, etc. We don't find out until very late in the year, and we can't make any assumptions for them. Moving further on into the presentation, Chair, I want to refer members to the headline numbers on slide 75. I mentioned earlier in terms of the split of the cost versus activity, you'll see that the ongoing level of activity is fairly static within the service, as I mentioned earlier. So this is packages at the end of P6, and there's no movement, and that's a real testament to the Better Lives programme, promoting independence and supporting people to remain in their communities. But here you'll see the differentiation between people over the age of 65 and people with learning disabilities. So there's just under 2,500 older people in receipt of services and just over 1,200 people with learning disabilities. So you can now see this disparity in terms of the spend and the challenge that we face within this area. Slide 76 and 76 sets out the spend per day. This is how we keep oversight on our spend within the service, and you can see this growth through 21-22, through 22-23, and then into 23-24, and that continued growth in the spend within the service, and that's offset by the static position in terms of activity. In terms of, tell me if Chair, is this a good pace? I just want to make sure that I'm not missing too much. In terms of slide 80 and 81, these set out some of the commissioning challenges in terms of the inflationary expectations for 24-25. We're having discussions with the provider market currently about the significant financial pressures that we're under as an organisation and within local government in general, and we'll be having further negotiations with them in the new calendar year with regard to inflationary uplifts in 24-25. And the set out on page 81 provides clarity in terms of the real living wage uplift for 24-25 and the national living wage uplifts for 24-25 and their impacts on our overall bottom line. Slides 83 onwards set out the Ealing position, Ealing Council position relative to other boroughs. Some of this information is slightly out of date, so you'll see I'm taking members to slide 85, which sets out the spend per head by comparing London, Ealing with the London averages through 18-19 to 21-22. You'll see that the top line shows the spend in London, which has been continued growth. With Ealing, we were starting off from a much higher spend than the average across London boroughs, but we then saw a reduction in spend per head, which was through the Better Lives programme, a promotion of independence model, which has been very effective. And when we've done surveys and engagement with local people, they've seen this as a really positive move. And you can see that there's been some growth in Ealing in 21-22, which is reflected with a similar level growth in London as a whole. The spend per 100,000 population for London is 44, compared to Ealing is 41. So we're just under 10% less spend per head. The next table that I'll take you to is on slide 86, which shows that spend per head is bottom quartile relative to the rest of London. And the next slide, on slide 87, we're borough 10 within this data set, which shows our spend split by older adults and younger adults. And we have the lowest spend in London in terms of spend per head for people over the age of 65. The chart on page 88 shows the offlog. This is a new data requirement that's coming from national government in terms of performance monitoring across all local authorities, and this shows the proportion of spend on adult social care as a percentage of core funding for the council, and Ealing has the lowest core spend, has the lowest spend on adult social care as a proportion of core spending in London. Just want to take you through to the last slide, which is on slide 89. And this looks at the imbalance in terms of the funding that we receive from North West London in terms of our funding arrangements. In Ealing, we receive per head a significantly lower rate of Better Care Fund from North West London NHS ICS, which is a shortfall per head of population and rounded up to the Ealing population level of nearly £9 million a year. It's important to recognise that within the Ealing Health and Social Care system, we have the largest number of care home beds in North West London. We have significant numbers of people being placed in Ealing from central London boroughs, and the health and social care system has experienced the financial pressures associated with this and not receiving the requisite funding from the ICS to reflect that additional pressure. Further to that, some additional areas of information in terms of how the funding is split between inner and outer London. 117 funding in inner London is 50-50 and in outer London is 40-60. We think that costs Ealing Council just under £1 million per annum in terms of lost income, and that there's also been a variation in terms of how the winter pressures funding has been dealt with across North West London as a whole. And it's important to recognise within that as the largest borough in Ealing, we have the largest proportion of discharges, and our funding through NHS North West London is disproportionately low relative to that level of activity. So that is a very swift canter through a lot of information, Chair, and I'm conscious that members will want to ask questions, if that's okay to hand back.
Yeah, lovely. I think we may well have resolved our sound issue now. So I was going to invite Councillor Blacker as the Cabinet member just to unmute and to check if it's working for us. Councillor Blacker.
Am I audible in the room?
I think not still.
No. Ah.
Okay,
I am trying.
I'm very sorry, Councillor Blacker. We still have tech issues here. You can't give us your points in the Eurovision Song Contest. We will move to questions. So questions from Councillor Conti.
Thanks, Kerry. That was really informative. My question was really about, on the second pack of slides, you were just talking about that we have the lowest spend per head of anywhere in London. And I couldn't quite grasp if that's a good or bad thing. In the sense that obviously you don't necessarily want to be at the top of the list, but if we're at the very bottom, does that represent that people maybe aren't getting everything that they need or that they might be getting elsewhere? Because obviously we're, obviously in terms of the way we're paying our staff, they're paying the London Living Wage, or I forgot what it's called now, the real real living wage. And I'm assuming not all boroughs, for example, in London would do that. So why is there that discrepancy? And given that we're at the bottom of that list, how can we be sure that that all our residents they need from their packages of care?
I think it's an absolutely valid question, Councillor Conti. If I can take you back to the slide that shows the relative spend over the years, which is on slide, it's the first one that shows the comparative spend over years, which is on slide 85. The lower graph shows the Ealing position in 2018-19 up until 2020-21. And you'll see that our position for the first 3 years was above the London average, significantly higher. At that point, we implemented the Better Lives programme, which was promoting independence and supporting people to live more independent lives. And that had a significant impact on the levels of spend within the borough. We were supporting more people to live in the community. And we've got a very efficient and high quality home care offer. I think the assurance piece with regard to what does our spend position relative to other boroughs look like is an absolutely key one. Your question, are we underspending within this space? I don't think so, but it's something that we keep under constant review, as I presented to the previous committee when we went through the assurance processes and the performance data. It's something that we have to keep very closely aligned to, and that assurance piece is key to ensuring that we're meeting our statutory duties and meeting our responsibility as an authority. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, no problem.
So from what you're saying, what I interpret that to mean is that because of the initiatives that are being run, you're essentially saying that people are requiring less care than necessarily someone of this, the same person in another borough, because we've got in early. And is that right? What I've got from what you've said?
Yeah. And also and the other part is that because we've got such an efficient domiciliary care market in Ealing, so we've got one of the lowest costs in London for home care hours, but we're top quartile in terms of quality of the offer. That means we're supporting people within a sector that's effectively run of good quality. So where we're supporting more people at home and promoting independence, it's more cost effective.
I've got Mr. Cook and then Councillor Steed.
Thank you, Chair. You've got a presentation slide which talks about spend per day and service users with a spike in April 23 of 370, and then they suddenly disappear. So can you please explain what happened that month to clarify the issue?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Every time we take this report to members and we report on this basis, on a regular basis internally, the same question is asked. It's a data quirk at the end of the financial year where people are taken off the system and then have their services recommissioned. We've looked into it from every angle and it's not a true increase. It's a quirk in the data.
Councillor Steed.
Thank you. And just to agree with Councillor Conti, it's a really, really helpful report and raises lots and lots of questions, some of which I'm sure we won't think about until we get home later this evening or whatever. Over the years, certainly recent years, adult social services has regularly been over budget by some level. And I just wonder that, for you personally and your team, where you'll set budgets and you set targets, it must be quite demoralizing that actually you're always having to run to keep up with yourself, if you see what I mean. It's not a personal criticism, Kerry, don't take it like that. But that must be quite tough on you and your team, because you're constantly thinking, we're behind the curve here. We need to this. We need to cut back here. We need to find savings and stuff. I just wonder how you and your team cope with that, because I would, in your position, which thank God I'm not in, I would find that really quite demoralizing, and to keep your team motivated must be quite a challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Steed. From a financial position, prior to the pandemic, adult social care came in at an underspend for the preceding 2 financial years, because of the work that had been done about promoting independence and the Better Lives programme. So we know there is an effective model. The point about the resilience of the service, I just had a meeting with all my staff this morning, and we were talking about the significant financial challenges that the organisation faces, that local government faces nationally. It's not just an Ealing issue. So it is an extraordinarily challenging thing. But the bit that I was clear with my colleagues, and we had a very open and frank discussion about the issues that they face, is that they're all here to serve the local community, and their drive within their professional responsibilities, and this is all colleagues within adult social care, is to improve the outcomes and to serve the communities in Ealing. And that's what keeps them on the ball. That's what keeps them committed to public service, and they very much see it as a public service, their role that we're involved in. It is difficult, but I'm more than confident, and I'm parroting almost what I said to them earlier today. I'm confident in them as a group of professionals and a group of colleagues to make important and difficult decisions whilst keeping the communities that we serve at the heart of everything that we do. But I shall feed back to them, your concerns, because I think it's right and proper that everybody considers that.
Thank you, Kerry. Any other questions? Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you're not aware of the grants and the one-off bits of income that you'll get until the end of the year. So when you do your forecast, do you just make an assumption that you won't be getting anything, or do you assume that there will be something, and then how does that affect your forecast?
Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. I'm laughing and smiling and looking at colleagues within the borough-based partnership. It's really difficult to make assumptions about what the income will be through winter pressures grants and how the government of the day will respond to the challenges within the NHS. The grants are often associated with our response to supporting the acute hospital and discharge flow. We start off the year not making any assumptions, and then the assumptions are built upon as the income becomes available. We'll generally know all the money by the end of October. And by the end of October, we'll know what grants are available and coming into the service. But that's quite a long time within the year to have that lack of clarity. And there is some significant variations year to year.
Thanks, Kerry. Did you have a follow-up at all, Councillor Nagpal? No. Councillor Mataza.
I was just wondering, it would be good to be clear on current demands against the budget allocations, and it also to be good to see performance figures as well.
Is that something that we can take forward, Kerry?
So we can certainly overlay activity against spend. I think we did a very detailed update on activity in our plans last time in terms of the quality assurance processes and our activity. But I think if the Scrutiny Committee would find it useful to look at activity and spend on a regular basis, I'm more than happy to provide and produce that. We do that on a monthly basis internally already.
I think that would be really helpful. Thanks, and we'll take that forward as an action. Councillor Crawford.
Right, at page 64, the Q2 position shows 2.3 mil savings as red risk. How viable and safe are they? And page 73, could more detail be provided about the proposed surge review of packages and what are considered as the relevant care groups? Thank you.
Kerry, I'll bring you in.
Thank you. So in terms of the plans to manage efficiencies through the system, we will often run a RAG rating system, red, gold and green, in terms of opportunity and risk for each of the areas of focus, Councillor Crawford. We keep that under significant review. I have to be very clear about the statutory duties that we hold as a local authority in terms of providing services, and when there's any risk of that, then they fall outside of the areas of focus and work that we're doing. I can bring updates in terms of the reg rating of the savings plans to the committee, if that would be helpful, so you can see how they change over time, if that would be useful. In terms of the surge activity, the surge activities is a recognition that within the service we have limited staffing capacity because of financial limitations, but also because of recruitment and retention limitations. So it's a very difficult market to recruit permanent social care staff into currently within the council. But we also have increased levels of demand. So we're having to look at different ways of using our resources to respond to the increased demand. One of those pieces of work has included focusing a cohort of staff on completing reviews, one because we had a backlog of reviews and because we have a responsibility to ensure that people's care needs are being met. That was very successful. We've got further surges planned through January, February and March on front door to deal with waiting lists at the front door, to call people and explain and get updates from people, occupational therapy waiting lists. And we see this as a way of responding to the increased demand with our limited resources. We're carrying out a review of the impact of the surge approach with the corporate transformation team, and I'd be happy to bring an update on that probably April, May time, because then we'll have done 3 or 4 phases of a surge and to understand whether that's an effective response to the challenges the service faces. And sorry, your third question, Councillor Crawford, was... Okay.
I think that covers off all of them. Any follow-up at all, Councillor Crawford? You're happy with that? Yeah, lovely. Councillor Conti.
Just on learning disabilities, just because that's the only sort of service area that didn't see a reduction in the forecast variance in the last quarter. And is that because a lot of the schemes that you're running to try and reduce cost aren't applicable or can't be sort of used within that cohort? Or what are the particular challenges? Are there particular schemes that you're pursuing in that cohort to try and find some reduction in costs?
Thank you, Councillor. We're currently doing a deep dive in terms of the spend on services for people with learning disability, because some of the challenges that we're experiencing in this space is because it's a relatively small market and therefore it's a seller's market in terms of providers of services. We've been doing a huge amount of work in terms of young people transitioning into adult services who've got a learning disability, and that's been very successful in supporting independence, but also looking at continuing health funding to meet people's needs rather than the council meeting individuals' needs. And sometimes things take longer with people with learning disabilities in terms of promoting independence and finding people move on accommodation. Certainly with one case I've been working with, it's taken us probably 14 months to support an individual move from their current accommodation into a more independent accommodation, because we need to do it at their pace and with the right level of support. So sometimes things more often than not take a lot longer within that sector.
Thanks very much. I'm not seeing any further indications. I do have a question from Roy Willis from Skag. We haven't been able to resolve the technical problem, so I am going to just read that out. So after the positive news last year of the rollout of the real living wage to Ealing's home care workforce, it's difficult to understand how Ealing's average payment for 1 hour of home care is significantly lower than the Greater London average. In Alice Holt's 16th of November report for the BBC, it was stated that the average hourly home care rate paid by Ealing is £16.04, while the average rate across other London boroughs is £19.01. Is there an explanation for this discrepancy, as it could adversely affect recruitment of home carers and the viability of local home care agencies.
Thank you very much for your question, Roy. The report from the BBC was sadly somewhat out of date. Ealing Council currently pays £17.65 per hour, and we're also very clear that we're proud of being a real living wage payer in the domiciliary and community care sector, and we think that's key in terms of our response to the recruitment and retention challenges. We've been significantly investing and working with the care market for many years now to support the quality of the offer, and the council only commission new services from home care providers that are good and outstanding, rated by CQC. As a product of that work, we have, and I think I mentioned this earlier, we've got top quartile performance in terms of CQC rating of home care services in London, but we also know that we've got relatively low unit costs that we pay. I am not concerned currently about the home care market in Ealing. It's dynamic, it's engaged, we work very closely with it, and we get a good efficiency because we buy a lot of hours, and we work closely with the sector to ensure that they're supported to maintain good quality services.
Thank you, Kerry. And my Vice Chair has asked for the final bite of the cherry. So, Councillor Steed, over to you.
Thank you. Earlier, Kerry, you said that you were confident that the Better Lives programme was having a long-term beneficial effect. Are there any particular key criteria that lead you to that conclusion?
Thank you, Councillor Steed. Following the Better Lives programme and prior to the pandemic, so that would have been in late 2019, early 2020, we conducted a consultation with people about their experience of the Better Lives programme and the council's focus on promoting independence and community connectivity. We got some very positive responses through that, and I think they were presented here through Health Watch. But I can certainly look at that report again to represent it to yourself, Councillor Steed, in terms of the impacts. We know that when we survey and engage with local people, and that's in Ealing, but also pretty much everywhere nationally, people wish to remain within their own community and as independent as possible. And that has been very much the focus through the Better Lives programme through 18, 19, 19, 20. And we're trying to get back into that space again now through continued promotion of independence. But I'll double check. I'm sure Anne-Marie may remember, but I'm sure we brought the report here through Health Watch.
Yeah, we can double check that. Thank you for that, Kerry. Recognise the difficult financial position that you continue to grapple with. Appreciate your team's work. We will ask you for the activity and spend information, and I think it would be helpful to have the RAG rating alongside that, demonstrating the progress and any of the challenges as well. You mentioned about coming back in May with an update on the surge approach, and we'll probably take you up on that as well. Just to say, colleagues, we won't be able to hear from Robert McCulloch-Graham, the independent chair of our Adult Safeguarding Board this evening. We will defer that item to a future meeting. So both Robert and Councillor Blacker can kind of stand down. I don't want them to unnecessarily wait on the meeting because we're not going to be able to resolve those technical problems this evening. However, I am mindful that Sarah Boston in the public gallery has come along to ask a question specifically on the Safeguarding Adult report, but it does have a link in with adult social care. So I'm going to ask Sarah, if you want to come forward, you can ask your question, and Kerry will be happy to respond to that. If you switch on the microphone next to Kerry, you can share that between you. That'd be lovely.
Actually, my question follows on. Sorry, I'm Sarah Boston. I'm part of Ealing Save Our NHS as well, live in Ealing, and I'm getting old, so I might one day soon need social care. My question is really, we hear a lot about staffing shortages across the country in social care and care workers. I wonder what it's partly you've touched on recruitment and retention. So what I'm wondering is not just about the current challenges of recruitment and retention, and you've touched on it a bit, and around pay, but also the government's proposal that care workers can't bring their families in, dependents in, and how much is that going to impact on recruitment and retention?
Thank you, Sarah. Kerry, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. So recruitment and retention is a significant challenge across health and adult social care, and we know that in terms of our current position and our experiences over the last few years in terms of recruiting both to professional roles within social work, but also care staff. The council is actively working with our partners within the care sector to get an understanding of what the proposed changes will be in terms of the legislation and what the impact will be within the market. As I've mentioned earlier, we've got a very dynamic domiciliary care market, and we rely quite heavily upon that, and any changes to their ability to recruit and retain staff due to changes within the legislation around immigration would be complex for us. What I propose to do is to bring further update to the HASP in the new year and potentially do that with NHS.
We won't take the safeguarding paper this evening. We'll defer that to a future meeting. So it does mean it rather is the Kerry show tonight. Kerry, I'm coming your way again on the review of the Ealing Adult Social Services Partnership Boards. This is an update position in terms of the implementation of co-production boards. Colleagues around the table will remember that we looked at this for those who were on the committee last year in April of 2023. So I'll take questions from colleagues after Kerry's presented the update paper.
Thank you, Chair. So as Councillor Weston's mentioned, this came to the HASP in April 2023. The proposals are a response to the corporate plan for great engagement with communities and the importance of community voice and individual voices in influencing how we provide services and respond to the needs of the community. The Integrated Adult Social Care and Health Commissioning team undertook a review of the existing partnership boards and completed a discovery review in which they presented in April 23. That involved lots of how the partnership boards are identified as supported by adult social services, and how the partnership boards interface within the health and wellbeing and the HASP boards, how the board structures for the partnership boards differ and how are they interconnected, looking at potential inconsistencies with regard to the agenda setting and the outputs of the boards, and recognising that we have 5 different partnership boards currently. They all operate slightly differently, and are we getting a coherent voice of the local community in terms of influencing how our services work. Looking at how we resource and the potential of how we resource the partnership boards and maximising the impact of the partnership boards in terms of co-production for the council and for our partners locally, and identifying how the partnership boards can link with other engagement groups and provider forums and NHS provider engagement groups. And the key findings from the discovery review confirm that the partnership boards are a valued route for engagement and co-production, that there's a good level of commitment from officers within adult social care and across the partnership, that pace and agenda setting are effective, that there's good and effective information sharing across the partnership boards and with local people. And then there's good engagement with the council, where service users or users of its experience were stating that they felt that their contribution was valued. As mentioned before, we looked at how we can improve the co-production process, so cross-working between the partnership boards where there's a shared issue. How do we use the cumulative power of the partnership boards and increasing the voice of the memberships of the partnership boards, looking at the appropriate support, administration support and sharing arrangements for the partnership boards. We've targeted a piece of work around improving carers' representation within the partnership boards. Currently, a number of the partnership boards exclude carers because the people who use the services felt that it was important that their voice was heard and that carers should have a separate and different group to share their views and experiences. To improve the mechanisms for a consistent service user expert by experience representation, and move to a position where we have consistency in terms of chairing. I chair 4 out of the 5 partnership boards, and it's probably not good that I chair so many of the groups, and I do co-chair with a number, but looking to people who use our services or community representatives to be the chairing. So in terms of the proposals, and moving on to slide 93 within the pack, is to move on a proposal to merge the learning disability and people with autism with partnership boards, to split the older adults and long-term conditions partnership boards. Currently, we've got an integrated board, and to create an additional carers partnership board within the structure. There was discussion about whether partnership boards should be developed to reflect the 7 towns model, but this was seen as not something that we would progress at this stage. The structure chart on page 93 sets out the proposed structural arrangements within the partnership boards, and you'll see here that there'll be an autism partnership board, mental health and suicide prevention partnership board, learning disability and autism partnership board, older adults partnership board, physical disability and sensory impairment partnership board, and a carers partnership board. So we've got a range of groups coming together, and that the representative chairs from, and that would be service user rep chairs, will attend a strategic co-production board where we will look to find agreement on areas of shared concern and issue that will be brought into the more formal process, such as the Health and Wellbeing Board or the HASP, to present the requests and the views of those boards within a more formal and political environment. There's ongoing discussions with regard to recompense and support for individuals who are taking more formal roles within the partnership boards. The recognition that local people who take on the responsibility of chairing partnership boards, co-production boards, should be recognised financially, but we need to do that within a space of understanding how that's applied consistently across the council, and also recognise the difficult financial position that we're in. The timescales for the change in the implementation is that we expect the strategic partnership co-production board, I've got to stop calling them partnership boards, the strategic co-production board will be up and running by the end of March 2024. We therefore expect to see a more coherent approach, and the voice of the user and the voice of the community playing a much greater role in terms of the discussions and decision making within the Health and Wellbeing Board, and potentially the HASP chair if you wish to invite them to come here for specific issues in terms of the function and role of the scrutiny panel.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Kerry, and really grateful in particular for you and the team taking on the panel's sort of feedback in terms of a focus on co-production, because I think that is really important. I will bring in questions from colleagues. If there are no questions, I have some. Oh, Councillor Crawford.
Chair 94, you tell me why it takes, I know you're busy, I know everyone's busy, but bureaucracy, why does it take a year to draft a strategy? Implementation of the revised structure, I believe it's taken...
I believe it's taken approximately 6 months, Councillor Crawford. So he came here in April 23. So the strategy's been ready.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's reasonable. Okay. Yeah. And there was something else I wanted to ask, and oh yeah, I'm pleased that you're not considering the partnership boards to reflect the 7 towns, because that was discussed a couple of years ago, and I feel very strongly that the 7 towns are very different, and people will give the views on the delivery that they probably have, the support they have, which is a bit sort of, you know, it doesn't reflect, you know, what the service that everyone will get. So there'll be pluses and minuses. So I'm very glad that you're not taking that option, but I am concerned it's here because we did discuss it in length a couple of years ago, and I'm finished.
Carrie, over to you.
Thank you. It's an absolutely valid point, Councillor Crawford. We looked at the 7 towns option, and the litmus test that we had was that if consultation with people with learning disabilities and autism and other vulnerable groups that we serve within adult social care, when we reach the day that those individuals' voices are as clearly and loudly heard as other people in the communities in the 7 town, then it'll be fine for us to move to an approach where, you know, the whole community is heard together on a 7 towns basis. We're not there yet, so it's important that we still hear the voices of those individuals somewhere separately and have that route into the formal structures of the council.
Councillor Crawford.
If that was ever the case, I hope you'd follow suit with carers, because that to me is important, and you know how there is support being delivered to carers, you know, equally throughout the borough. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further questions? I have 2. So just in terms of the strategy, Kerry, it'd be, given the committee's interest, it'd be really interesting to see if there's an opportunity for us to sort of contribute in terms of whether you're doing any kind of further consultation on that. And then just in the context of the conversation that we've been having around budgets, I'm just interested to know how much kind of pressure this is adding to your already kind of overstretched budget. I'm not saying that it's not important work, it absolutely is, but I think it's important for us to sort of know a little bit more on that front.
So the costs associated with the implementation of the new structure for co-production boards is minimal. I think the cost is something like £20,000 for the implementation programme, which is a lot of money, but in terms of having a new structure in terms of the co-production boards and engagement on a more meaningful basis for local people is going to be key. The ongoing function of the co-production boards is something we're currently looking at in terms of any remuneration for chairs is something that we're going to have to be very clear on, and also support for the board as a whole. There's some really clever stuff that's being done in terms of minute taking, AI, etc. We think will help support, reduce some of the costs potentially. We know that we work closely with a range of partners in terms of the engagement piece, and I think that will be important that some of the load is shared across the piece. I think in terms of the development of the strategy, that the strategic co-production board will bring questions to this committee. I think that they'll ask questions of scrutiny and raise issues that you will be interested in, and I think that's something that we will see more and more as the voice becomes stronger in terms of local people's involvement around services.
Lovely, thanks, Kerry. I'm just looking around the room for any further indications. Have a question from Roy. Willis. So he says, ERSCAG welcomes the focus in the reports on engaging directly with people most affected by social care policies and experts by experience. But Roy would ask what additional resources and support are envisaged to facilitate the equal participation of these people in the newly reformed co-production boards. I think you've touched on it, Kerry, actually, but is there anything that you wanted to add on that point?
I think, again, it's Roy's spot on in terms of the question. It's going to be really important that the users by experience, experts by experience's voice and role within the co-production process is front and centre. And as I said, Chair, we'll need to be clear in terms of how those costs are met within the organisation. An organisation that's clearly hears the voice of the customer and the community will get other efficiencies elsewhere. I'm sure that will make up for any minimal cost for supporting the co-production boards.
Thank you, Kerry. Any further comments at all? No, in which case, thank you very much for that, Kerry. So the final item on the agenda is the date of the next meeting. So we are finishing earlier than anticipated. So you can see that as an unexpected Christmas gift from Ealing Council to all of you. So the date of our next meeting is the 19th of March. However, obviously, in light of the situation today, you see, I take with one hand and give with the other, or whatever. We may need to have another meeting before the 19th of March to cover off the Safeguarding Adults report and to look into the situation with the ICS funding. But Anna Marie and myself will keep you posted on that. And the final thing to say is just wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So thank you very much.